First of all,
we love you!
we love you! For me, it's not an election if I don't get to come to Worcester. So, Mayor Petty, thank you for welcoming me. It's great to be at Clark, Mr. President. Thank you for welcoming me.
Much pleasure.
I want to thank I'm also high on Martha and Steve, but that's legal. So we circled, and the third time was the charm, and I'm glad to be here. I want to thank Attorney General nominee Maura Healey, who's here. Two people who started out with me when only my mother thought I could be elected president. Hillary and Chelsea were still undecided. State Senator Dick Moore and State Senator Mark Pacheco, thank you for being here. Dick Moore's in a vigorous race. If you can help him, you ought to do it. And finally, I want to thank Jim McGovern. We had a special relationship when I was president, long toward the end of my service. He came to see me one day and he said, you know, you've worked hard to help our area, and we did. We got you a lot of money for this neighborhood, actually, to do various development projects. He got really interested in malnutrition among poor children around the world, and in the fact that at the time, there were about 200 million kids who never went to school. And so Jim McGovern said that we should offer a free lunch to kids in poor countries, but only if they came to school together. And it was too late to get any money appropriated in Congress, so we scrounged around and found $300 million. And Jim authorized, he got the bill passed to spend the money that was there and allocate it to this program, the Department of Agriculture budget. Now, and I just want you to know what happened. Because of his bill, 6 million kids went to school the next year.
Thank you.
Spending $50 a year to give kids a decent meal in school, which was often the only good meal they got all day, also gave them a chance to have a new life. So he's been good for you, he's been good for America, and he's been good for the world. I have a lot of memories of Worcester. I really wanted to come here. I'm glad that since I'm basically here to help Martha and Steve, I'm glad they agreed to let me come here. Or I would have gone wherever they wanted. But I'll never forget the time I came here when the Republicans were trying to run me out of office, and there were 20,000 people in the street in Worcester with handmade signs. It wasn't an organized thing. When Hillary and I came to honor your fallen firemen and that vast international crowd of people that included firefighters from all over the world. I'll never forget the time I came here on my wife's behalf in 2008 and what happened as a result of that. I'll never forget any of that. And I'm here because I care about you. I owe you a lot. And I know something about the decision that people in Massachusetts are about to make. Every election is a job interview. Think about it. But the difference in most job interviews is that the voters, that is the people who get to do the hiring, get to hear the candidates not just interview for the job, but describe it. Usually, when you interview for a job, there's a description already written out. So you come in and you tell what you've done and you say what you want to do. All the rest is smoke and mirrors. It's a job. Before I was a governor for 12 years, right before Massachusetts led the way in electing me president, I was Attorney General. I know something about this work, both jobs. Experience and performance matter.
Thank you.
In both those jobs, Martha Coakley has done the right things for people, and she has not only advocated them, she's actually gotten things done. And the record matters because what you did indicates what you will do. If you say, vote for me, I'm going to do these 5 things, and you actually do them, then if you ask people to vote for you for something else and they tell you what they're going to do, there's a pretty good chance they'll do it. And you don't have to guess because they already did. So it matters to me that as a prosecutor and as Attorney General, Martha supported Massachusetts businesses and consumers in pushing back on excessive utility rates and fighting cybercrime, a big deal for businesses today. It matters that she took on insurance companies when she thought they tried to drive rates up too much. It matters that she stopped Medicaid fraud and actually got the money back from the taxpayers. It matters even more to me that she's been a relentless advocate for children and families against child abuse and violence. And that she's done something about credit card abuse. And in the worst time in our country's recent history after the financial crash, there was no Attorney General in the entire country that did as well as she did in keeping hardworking people in their homes. 30,000 people in this state. You know she'll do what she said she's going to do because she said she was going to do those things and she did. That matters. It's a job. Look, I can't run for anything anymore. I think the only reason that people ask me to come out election time is that I'm like an old racehorse and they want to drag me out on the track to see if I can get around it one more time without falling over. But I can tell you one thing. When your service is over, there are only 3 things that matter. It's the only way that you should keep score. Are people better off when you quit than when you started? The children have a brighter future, and are things coming together instead of being torn apart? If that's the test, Martha Coakley will win this election. Quite simply, she's got a better record than her opponent has.
Of course, of course.
There's not any doubt about it. Just look at the facts. And that's probably why the Republican governors have spent $6-7 million trying to trash that record. And why one of these third-party groups claimed that she was weak on child abuse, and it was clearly a lie. And the mother of a child who was killed in the care of a nanny, and Martha supported by prosecuting the nanny, had a very emotional press conference and talked about what a fraud the ad was. Now, look, if you run enough ads over a long enough time, you might make a mistake. I was really proud of one of my party's candidates for the U.S. Senate because he ran an ad that seemed to be a little off, and he got up and took responsibility and said this was a mistake, and he took it down. That's not what happened here. Her opponents figured out watch a television ad and heard the latest press conference. They won't know. Who cares? Now I want to ask you something. All the people who are paying for these out-of-state ads, do you really think they give a rip about your kids?
No way!
Your family?
No way!
No!
Where will they be on the day after the election? They will be gone. And you will be left with your decision and its consequences for good or ill. This is really, really important. And so let's look at their plan. Martha says we should increase our investment in early childhood education. We've got 17,000 kids on the waiting list, and they ought to be taken off. And her opponent said that wasn't a particularly effective strategy. Sort of like it's a waste of money. Well, Hillary's coming up here in a few days, and you'll like that better. And she can say more about this, but let me tell you something. You know, we just celebrated our 39th anniversary. And we celebrated it by invitation from the parents. We celebrated it by going over to Chelsea and Mark's home and playing with our granddaughter. Here's what I know about her commitment to get rid of the waiting list, and her opponent saying it's not that big a deal. If you don't get rid of that waiting list, by the time my granddaughter enrolls in kindergarten, she will have heard 3 million more words than poor children in families whose parents worked long hours and didn't get any formal education. 3 million words that affects the development of the brain and the potential of kids in the future. There is no better investment for the future of Massachusetts than making sure you get rid of that waiting list and put all these kids in preschool. She wants to expand financial aid for community college to improve the STEM enrollments and outcomes. There's something else I think you ought to ask yourself. I still do a lot of reading on education, and I saw an article the other day that if Massachusetts were a separate nation, it would have one of the top 8 education systems in the world. And it said, it said, we're not talking about just Cambridge and Beacon Hill here. We're talking about the whole Commonwealth, including the schools in the lowest income districts, the schools full of first-generation immigrants, that because of a 20-year effort, you have worked hard to do that. You need somebody who will protect and improve on that. That is your meal ticket to the future. Then there's this issue about your ballot initiative, granting earned sick time. Martha's for it, her opponent says, no, it'll cost jobs. Well, I was just in Connecticut a few days ago, and they've had paid sick leave for a few years now. They've had vigorous job growth the last 4 years. They went from having the biggest debt per capita in the country to having a surplus in their rainy day fund. They're doing just fine, thank you very much, taking care of the basic needs of families. She was a big supporter of the raising the minimum wage. Her opponent said, I don't know, it might cost jobs. Man, I've heard that old song. That is a tired old song. If you raise the minimum wage to 20 bucks an hour tomorrow, it would cost jobs. That's not what anybody was talking about doing. But look, median family income is lower today than it was the day I left office. And it was before the financial crash. Because all the gains are going to people at the top. If you raise the minimum wage, you don't just raise the minimum wage, you help all the people that are a little bit above the minimum wage. And then because most of them are family people who are spending all they've got to keep body and soul together and take care of their kids, they go spend the money, it rolls around in the economy, it creates jobs. I raised it as governor, I raised it as president, I tried to raise it a second time, and I couldn't convince the Republicans to do it. I have never personally been involved in any increase in the minimum wage that was not beneficial to the economy as well as the economic trend. You don't need trickle-down economics in the state's economic policy. You need build-out economics, give people that are poor the chance to work their way into the middle class, double down on your universities, double down on your community colleges, double down on your school system. You're going to do great. You've got a model that most of this country and most of the world would die to have. Don't mess it up. And I want to say a few words about Steve. He wants to help the homeless, and he wants to help veterans. It should really bother you that the veterans' unemployment rate is higher than the national average. It should bother you that veterans are trained to do things in the military that have great civilian applications and they still can't get certified for it without going back to school, but they often can't afford it and incurring debt they won't be able to repay. It's a good thing. Massachusetts can also lead the way on that. Now, I've heard all this stuff, but you don't understand. We like to elect moderate governors around here, and this guy's moderate. He's so pleasant and good. I have nothing against him. All I know is 4 years ago, when politics were in a different fashion, he said he doubted climate change was real and man-made. He was against the minimum wage. He wanted homeless people to have proof of residence before they got in the shelter. I thought being homeless meant And then he said this Hobby Lobby decision, whatever you think about the Hobby Lobby decision, was no big deal. It may not be a big deal if you don't know any woman who can't afford contraceptives, but there are a lot of women in this country that can't afford contraceptives and take care of the kids they've got and do all the things they need to do. So you can be for it or against it, but you shouldn't be blasé because you think everybody can afford it, so we don't have to worry about it. You need to think about, look, I'm just somebody who loves you, who lives somewhere else. I don't have a vote here. But I have been a governor, and I have been Attorney General, and I know what works. And I think Massachusetts would be stronger and healthier and more united if Martha Coakley is the next governor. Where we share the opportunities and share the responsibilities and we're all part of a united community works better than you're on your own and trickle down. It just does. It works better everywhere in the whole wide world. So, I don't care what the polls say. She can win this race handily if you want it bad enough. Because you know as well as I do, that all midterm elections are characterized by a drop-off in the poll in the number of people who vote for the presidential year. And surely people finally are figuring out that it really does matter who gets elected governor and senator and congressman and to the state legislature. I mean, it matters. All you've got to do is to identify the people who always vote in presidential elections, who don't normally vote in these elections, and make sure a significant percentage of them do, and you win this thing going away. And you just have to decide how bad you want it, but I'm just telling you, it really does matter who your governor is. And you have so many things going for you. And even though people don't feel it yet, and it won't be part of the election mix, America's coming back. It takes 10 years on average, has for 140 years, for any advanced country to come back from a financial crash. We have recovered all our lost jobs in 6 years. It's been a long, agonizing, frustrating thing, but we beat the global average of 140 years by 4 years. Now we've got to start building on that. We've already created more jobs than Europe and Japan combined. Now we've got to start building on that. But the reason that Martha and Steve should be there is that the next big challenge is to make sure our prosperity is more broadly shared. People in high-income groups forgotten what the rest of my life was like. We're going to do just fine. And we do not need phony incentives which could be better invested in growing the middle and helping poor people work their way. That's my pitch. It's a job. You're conducting a job interview.
They're hired.
It's got, she's defined the job better. She's got a better record and she got a better plan. And all you've got to do is to increase the number of employers who make the hiring decision.
Yeah.
Will you do that? I love this place.
I love you. We love you.
I felt at home here the first time I ever came, and I thought it'd be better for me to have a talk with you and give some whoop-to-do speech. I'm just telling you, you heard what he said about how many hours are left in this race. Every single one of you will speak to, in these next 19 days, or how many days there are, 100 people who might not vote. Every one of you. And if they all do vote, we'll all be celebrating on election night. Don't forget this. This matters. It's a job. Will people be better off when she quits than when she started? Yes. Will the children have a better future than if her opponent wins? By light years. Will things be coming together instead of drifting apart? Yes. That is worth your time, your effort, your vote, and your enthusiastic support. Thank you, and God bless you.
My phone died, man.